Okay, we'll be starting in about 15 minutes. So if you're joining us on Zoom, just make sure that you have yourself muted. Thanks, Chuck. I appreciate that. And we'll get started in a few minutes. Just want to make sure we get everybody in. We start at 6:30 Central. Just making sure our YouTube stream does have audio. So I hope I'm saying your name right, Jeffet. Or is it Jeff? Just want to make sure you can hear me okay now. We'll be starting in a few minutes. So like I said, right now, if you want to get yourself set up, go ahead. For those of you joining us on YouTube, if you have any questions, just put them in the live chat. I'll be monitoring those as we're going, and I can pass those questions along to James or answer them directly. And if you are on Zoom and you have a question, go ahead and use the chat feature. Or if you hear us, tell us, we'll go ahead and tell you to go ahead and unmute yourself. But if you can leave yourself on mute while you're on Zoom, that will help a lot. Just, background noises, and you don't have to worry about running and getting the dog or the cat or whatever. So just give us a few minutes and we'll be starting here in a bit. And I'll go ahead and share my screen so y'all can see what we are doing. If you are on YouTube and want to join the Zoom call, just preference wise, you can do that by logging into your FineWorks account. And let me just share my screen there so you can see what the dashboard looks like. And you will see James has got the button there for Zoom and then also to watch on YouTube. And Gail on YouTube, thank you, Gail. Glad you're able to hear. If any audio issues come up, just let us know. We're going to be letting everybody kind of join in right now. And again, just go ahead and make sure you have yourself muted when you enter the room. Ryan and Kim. Just going to mute you as you come in. And as you can see on here, we have our presentations that are going to be coming up. We have the one that we're doing today, making your digital files of your art for fine art prints. And first Thursday, what Jim has coming up is pretty cool. This is great for photographers and artists alike. Foundations of Building Priceless. So this is something you want to tune in. We get that a lot. Even working in a gallery, I hear that a lot on what to set prices at. So this is going to be some great information that you can go ahead and use. So if you're an artist or photographer, that'll work for you. And I think Ryan and Kim, I think your mic is on, if you can mute that. Thank you. We should be starting here in about 10 minutes. And did you have your hand scanner there? Yep. Okay.
I'll mention something about as well.
All right. We'll talk about those. Yeah.
Kind of some opening business.
Yeah. Also in your outline, if you want to go over the new post, how the cropping tools and everything is, the new view of it when you go into post now. Yeah. So in a little bit, if you want to
run a little slow, I don't want to do
this. So yeah, we have some things that we're going to share with you guys that are also here for FineWorks now. It's November, so happy November. And this is the start of holiday sales. So everything starts to get a little crazy from here on out. So, just let us know, especially if you're a brand new user to FineWorks. I think people coming in November, December, and I want to say really anywhere you go into it, it's the hardest time to start probably something new, but let us know if you are new and you need some help, and you can reach out on social media as well. And we have great customer service. Brandy and Angel are amazing. They're helping our customers. Get ready. Got about 10 minutes. Gina, thanks for joining us on YouTube. We appreciate it. And again, if you're joining on YouTube and have any questions, just go ahead and you can use that live chat feature. I'll be monitoring those as we're doing this. And then I see Ryan and Kim, you have a question there. Let me see.
Yeah, thanks for taking my question. Just real quick before you get started, I won't take up too much of your time. When a customer is purchasing a note card, for example, on your guys' website, and they're uploading their art to that, there's an option that says color correction. When a customer picks that option, what all happens? Does a physical person actually look at the digital file versus the print, or?
Well, James, can I go ahead and I'll mute and I'll let you explain that
Okay.
color correction?
Yeah.
Here, let me go ahead. I'm going to let James answer your question, Ryan. Hold on one second. Let me just mute me.
Thank you.
Let me start the video. And this is from Ryan, is that correct? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Hello, Ryan. Yeah, good question. As far as the color correction is concerned, it is a two-phase process. The first phase is an automatic filter, kind of like almost like Photoshop's color correction option or auto color, where it just kind of does some general color balancing to make sure that you have a distinct white point and distinct black point. The other phase involves one of our printer technicians, whoever's doing the printing, opening up the file in Photoshop itself and making additional adjustments. One of the things that any sort of auto correction does is it's not able to take into account the content of the image, or take into consideration what the image is about. Obviously, if it's an abstract art, their ability to determine that is going to be kind of difficult. But if it's, let's say, if it's a bridal portrait, well, they know that they need to make sure that the flesh tones look realistic, that the image looks fine. So they're going to use their best judgment. Now, we have multiple printer technicians, so what one printer technician does one time might not necessarily be what they do the next time around, because it could be someone else, or it could be that they, when it comes to making manual adjustments with any sort of image, you may think you have the adjustments correct one day, and then the next day you may look, I think I could tweak it a little bit better here or there. So it is definitely an organic process at that point, and so it's not going to have the same consistency. That first phase is going to be consistent, but that first phase is not going to provide it's not going to be able to take into context the subject matter of the image. It's going to treat all images the same. So it's not going to know an abstract piece versus a photograph of a landscape. It's that second phase, that human aspect, that human phase, which is going to be able to take that part into consideration. So that's essentially how our color correction process works. Does that make sense?
Yeah, good answer. I just got a image uploaded. I got a sample sent to me because I kind of wanted to see what it looked like.
I have my audio off, so maybe if I turn it. Okay.
Slightly on, but I can't.
Okay. I don't know if you said anything, but I had my audio off, so
I was saying, can you hear me?
Yeah.
We hear you now.
I was just saying that I got a sample sent to me, and the sample is way darker than what the digital image is. So, but I didn't opt for any kind of color correction. So now I know next time I'll go ahead and opt for color correction, and hopefully it'll be a little bit lighter because it looks great on the computer, and then on paper print it's just like super dim. But obviously, maybe my file needs to just be tinkered with or something. So.
Yeah, I personally would try to adjust your screen instead, so you don't have, because you are going to have a better idea as to how that image is going to look. Is it photography or is it artwork?
It's a photo of a painting.
Yeah, we generally do not recommend doing the color correction when it comes to artwork. We recommend it more for photography. It's just because, like I said, it's hard to really kind of know what that original is supposed to look like.
Yeah,
so
totally understand.
Yeah, so even if you opt for the color correction, it could come out too bright, it could come out too dark. There's just no way of knowing because we don't have the original to compare it to.
Yep.
So if the file itself is too dark, then that's usually easier. It's easier to predetermine if your files are too dark than it is for us to determine that.
Gotcha.
And what I would do is I would look at calibrating your computer screen, because that will, by calibrating your computer screen, you'll have a better idea whether or not it's displaying images that are making the images appear too dark. And we have a calibration print that you can order, or it comes with our sample kit. I don't know if you've gotten that from us. It's okay, but really, I think in your case, what I would recommend looking at is getting, especially if you're going to be doing lots of printing, look at it as an investment, where you're going to be doing lots of prints, selling those prints, and you want those prints to consistently be as accurate as possible. Look at getting one of those tools that you actually measure the light emitted from your monitor and calibrates your monitor that way.
Okay.
And they run from $100 to several $100. One is the Color Monkey. How do you spell that? COLORMUNKI, I think. That's a good one. The Spider, which is what we use here, SPYDER. That's another one. Just look those up online. You can get them at Amazon. Make sure you're also using a computer screen that you can adjust the brightness and the dark levels and emitted from your computer screen. But those will go a long way, even if because there's another process you can go, and John Stein, thanks John. John mentioned those in the chat here. But those particular items will go a long way, but they can also give you the potential to be able to do something called soft proofing, which we were going to discuss later on. And soft proofing allows you to simulate on your screen exactly, or as exact as possible as your computer screen will allow for, how those tones will appear in print. So it simulates the actual print based upon the tone of the paper, the capability of the printing system that's being used. So those tools will allow you to actually do that as well. But even without that, your prints you're going to see improvements in your prints, a substantial improvement just by calibrating your computer screen.
Cool. Well, thank you for answering that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'm muted.
Okay, well, we're starting at 6:30 now, so we're going to go ahead and get ready to introduce James. James is going to talk about a few things. I'll have him introduce himself and a little bit about Fine and Works. We have a couple of new things we want to share also with you guys before we kind of jump into our presentation tonight. And I also just want to have out there too, guys, you know, we started these video Zooms to kind of help our customer base, which is all around the world. And especially when the pandemic hit, this became almost essential for any business to do. But it was kind of in the works, even pre-pandemic, was to do this for a reason that we wanted to be able to kind of answer your questions live, because we know that just from our customer service, things that are kind of like frequently asked questions. So sometimes a lot of us are more visual learners, and we figured these are great to have. So for 2022, which is coming up faster than you can say, we would love your input. So if you want to email, if you want to, you know, DM us in our social, anything that you guys want to see for next year that, you know, we haven't covered that maybe you would like us to walk you through on a Tuesday chat, because we plan on continuing these next year, and we want to be able to give you information you can use, and it's worth your time. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and mute myself and because I'm actually here at Finer Works this evening. So I'm actually here with James, and you can just want to take a round. I actually have my background still on. So it's great to be here right now. So I'm able to kind of work with him, but I'm going to mute myself, and we're going to do this CB fashion so that he can go ahead and talk.
All right. Yeah. So we actually have Melissa here live. So it's like we're like super honored to have you here. Yeah. Anyway, so I think we got a lot to talk about today. You know, some of this we've discussed in previous Zoom and YouTube live sessions for First Tuesday, and just a little reminder is all of them, right? All of our past First Tuesdays, and we have over a year's worth, are on YouTube and can be watched at any time. Some topics you might find, you know, like totally boring because, you know, they're you know, I'm the speaker. Other times we have some guest speakers which really do an excellent job of talking about the subject matter. So it's a lot of fun. Again, like Melissa had mentioned, it's to help educate our customer base. We do accept questions. We both via YouTube live. There's a chat feature as well as via Zoom. We ask that you just type in your questions there, and Melissa will transmit them to me and organically in person. Will let me know what those questions are, and we'll try to answer those. If we don't have the answer, we will find the answer, and we will try to get that information to you. All right, so what are we talking about today? We are talking about making your artwork into digital files, which is, you know, in most cases nowadays is a necessity if you are going to be doing any sort of printing. And some of the information is going to also be relevant to photography as well, which now most photographers are already shooting digitally, so they don't have to worry about capturing, finding the correct tool to capture the image digitally. They've already resolved that by finding the appropriate camera and so forth. But there is going to be some things which are relevant when printing those images. And we're going to try to discuss those things as well. So we're going to try to make this informative to both the artist as well as the photographer. Now, if you're a photographer that is still using film, and there are a few few out there, and some do it more just kind of something to fun to do, even though they might usually capture their imagery digitally. Some of it will be relevant to them as well, especially the part about scanning. Anyway, so most printing nowadays has turned into a digital process, whether or not you're printing brochures and flyers for some event, or if you are printing fine art. In most cases, printing nowadays is done digitally. And what does that mean? That means that you need a digital image. Now, there's various formats of digital files, and most of us are familiar with those. You have JPEG, you have TIFF, you have BMP or bitmap, you have vector formats like which Adobe Illustrator or CorelDRAW create, which are a bunch of coordinates, and you have SVG files, which are kind of a web version of like Illustrator files. You have PDFs, which technically you could throw into the mix as well. So all of these are what we call binary files, image files, which are used to represent the image. Now they're done so through the utilization of pixels. Pixels are the kind of like the little dots that make up the image. Think of, looking at a newspaper, and you see all the little dots of color, which all combined actually create an image. Digital images are essentially made up of these dots. Now, these dots are virtual. They're not something you can physically touch, obviously. They're bits of data, bits of information. And how that image information, that those pixels are formulated, has to do with the image format. Now, we had mentioned TIFFs, we had mentioned JPEGs, we had mentioned bitmaps. So PNG is another format that I forgot to mention. Some have advantages over other formats, but as far as printing is concerned, any of these mainstream formats are generally fine. Even JPEGs. Now, JPEGs are a compressed version of an image file. So one of the main differences between JPEG and these other formats that I mentioned is that it takes that data, okay, and strips away some of that information to make that file smaller, so it doesn't take up as much space on your hard drive or on your disk. A lot of photographers, wedding photographers or event photographers, they will shoot in JPEG mode. They'll set their cameras to something called JPEG mode, and they do so because they're trying to capture, trying to capture as many images as possible, so they don't have to switch out cards. Your fine art photographers or your portrait photographers might capture in something called a raw mode, which is a more robust format. So it's going to contain a lot more data. Now, when it comes to print, you can print any of these formats that we discussed, that we mentioned. JPEG, again, is going to be compressed, but generally JPEG is fine for printing. And that's one of the things I want to kind of stress and emphasize, because we have a lot of users that say, hey, I want to submit my TIFF files to y'all, but they take a long time to upload, they're really big and I'm having trouble managing them when it comes to transferring them. Well, the truth of the matter is JPEG files are generally fine as long as your original version of that image is an uncompressed version, like a TIFF. What you would do is you would save that image, you would export that TIFF or that other format into a JPEG, but most software, when you save a JPEG, gives you the option to determine the level of compression. Now, JPEG compressed at its lowest, at its highest level, or at its greatest extent, let's say, is going to be a much smaller file, less bloated than one compressed to the least amount. Now, the file that's compressed the most is probably not going to render a very good quality looking print. You're going to probably see something called artifacting, where your gradients don't look as smooth, or you don't see, I don't want to call it pixelation, but you see these areas of color, patches of color that just don't, aren't as smooth. Whereas if you hardly compress the JPEG at all, the file will be bigger, but those artifacts will not be visible. Okay. So when you transmit a file to us that is in JPEG format, try to do the least amount of compression as possible.
I had a question here from John asking, is there a better format that is better for printing?
The mainstream format is JPEG. And when I say mainstream, most of your color labs that, when it comes to printing photography at least, many of them only accept JPEG. Or if they're accepting orders on, at least in an online format, JPEG is the preferred. Especially once you get into the color labs, which are churning out, dealing with thousands of files a day. Using larger files like TIFFs, bitmaps, becomes quite expensive, both from a bandwidth standpoint as well as just managing those files in general. So a lot of companies will prefer JPEGs. Okay. Now, at Finer Works, we're still able to accept TIFFs. Okay. TIFF is, in my opinion, next to a native Photoshop file or a raw file is probably or with the exception of a Photoshop file or a raw file, is probably the best format. Okay. Problem with submitting a Photoshop file or a raw file to a color lab is there's certain things that are in those files that the software that processes those files might not be able to recognize. Whereas TIFF, it tends to be more universal. So my favorite format, if I were to, but just in general, is probably going to be TIFF. But there are some inherent problems with TIFF, and that again is the size. TIFFs do allow you to utilize layers. You can save a Photoshop layered file into a TIFF mode and or into a TIFF format, and it will preserve those Photoshop layers to an extent. There's certain things it won't preserve, but generally for your basic layers, they will. You can tell the TIFF, or when you're saving it to TIFF, you can tell Photoshop to include those layers or make those layers available in the TIFF. Matter of fact, with our die bond printing, where we have the option to print textured, like say the texture of brush strokes from an original piece that you're trying to reproduce, or some sort of custom texture, we have a way where you can actually submit a process where you can submit a file that is has a special what we call a texture layer, and so you can kind of customize how that texture on your dye bond prints are produced. And do we have that we have that posted somewhere where you can do that? I think we have it on our blog, if I'm not mistaken. So, but in order to do that, you would have to submit your file as a TIFF. And did that answer everything with that question?
I think,
Think
like I said, they were the best file format.
Yeah, it was a long answer to when I could have just said TIFF.
I think I put in the chat there too, just personally, when I scan
Yeah.
art, is that I find that I have to do less color correction.
Yeah.
And I think it's.
Well, here's the thing is every time you save a JPEG, you're going to add a little bit more compression, even if you do the least amount of saving. Okay. So I like to have, with some, like I used to create a lot of digital artwork. I had a very popular website actually where I posted and sold that digital artwork. And I always stored my files in either a Photoshop, TIFF, or a bitmap format because those were not compressed. But whenever I had to do something with those, like create prints of those, I always converted them to JPEG. So I looked at the JPEG as kind of as a disposable file that I could submit, but I had my core file that I did all my adjustments, or if I needed to go back and make some new adjustments with, I had it in one of those uncompressed formats. So, this is what you're going to want to do when you capture your artwork digitally. You want to make sure that you do all your editing and you save that file into one of those uncompressed formats, TIFF, Photoshop, bitmap. Those are probably the three most popular formats. If you're using a program like Paint Shop Pro or a lot of these image editing programs have their own proprietary formats. If you're going to continue to use those format or that particular software, I guess there's no reason why you couldn't do that. But one of the things is to keep in mind is TIFF tends to be a universal format. It's not attached to any one particular software brand. It's much more universal. So I'd probably go with the TIFF format. Let's talk about another thing about digital files. And there's a difference between, and it kind of, we started to allude to that with the first question from Ryan, the difference between a digital file and a print. One of the things to keep in mind is with a digital file, whenever you are looking at a digital image, you're dealing with a projected image. It's projected from the screen that you're looking at that image from, whether it be a computer screen, phone, tablet, even the little screen on the back of your digital SLR camera. It's a projected source. It's a projected image, whereas a print is reflecting the light around it. And so generally your projected image is always going to appear more accurate and consistent than your print. Your print, the colors and tones of your print can be affected by the colors and tones of the ambient light or direct light that's hitting it. So if you are ordering prints and your prints, the colors look a little off, you might find that they look a little bit more accurate under a different environmental setting. For instance, we'll have people order prints, and when they look at the prints under lights like what we have here, which are ultraviolet lights, prints tend to have a little bit of a kind of a bluish, coolish tone to them. It brings out those blues and makes those blues the pigments a little darker. But when people look at their prints under natural sunlight, the blues look a lot better. So that's one of the, believe it or not, one of the limitations of prints is prints do not consistently convey color in all instances, because they are much more likely to be influenced by external circumstances. Now, what you're seeing on your screen, like I had mentioned earlier, may not necessarily be accurate, but it is accurate. It's just not showing you how accurate it is until you actually are looking at it with an accurate monitor. The other day, actually it was yesterday, I was at the hardware store, and I was picking up some paints. We're getting ready to reopen another section at Finer Works, and some of the staff that's doing the painting, they needed the paints. And initially I'd looked at the paints online, but I couldn't tell exactly certain shades of paint, whether or not how accurate they were going to be if I ordered them online. So I thought, I really need to go and see these these tones in person. So I went to Home Depot, found the colors that we liked, and had them mix these 5-gallon buckets of paint, and we brought them back to where we're doing the painting. And they finished the first coat today. No, they finished both coats for the main lobby area that we're going to be looking at. And one of the things I noticed when they finished, I said, wow, it really brightened up the room. And we had chosen off-white. Now, I'm not complaining. It looks great, but it definitely looks a lot brighter than it did on the little sample. And it's because the lighting in there is so bright. So that's just an example of, everyday, an everyday example that I think even a non-artist might be able to relate to. There is some difference. Now, the key though, to also is going to be to capture your image as accurately as possible. And this kind of gets into the core of what we wanted to talk about, which is ways to capture your files or making digital files of your art. And there's really, I want to say there's really only two ways. And one is to scan your artwork, and one is to photograph your artwork. Both a scanner and a camera are going to convert a physical image into a digital image by capturing the colors and converting them to ones and zeros, to pixels. The process of photographing artwork, and let me just tell you right now, there are tons and tons of videos on YouTube, how to photograph your artwork. There's websites, blogs. We've even have a blog post. It's probably a little old now. But there's plenty of information out there and tips on how to capture your artwork. And I'm hesitant to prescribe a specific method, because when I look at different methods of capturing artwork via a camera, we're talking about utilizing certain shutter speeds, certain distances, things of that nature, is that what I like, the method that I like to use may not work as well for you. So I would look at the different things, but let me, or the different videos, different tutorials on doing that. But let me tell you what you're looking at doing if you want to capture your image, what tools you're going to need. One, if you are going to be capturing your artwork via a camera, which is one of the main tools, you're going to need good lights. You're going to need good lights that emit natural light. Now, if you're on a budget and you don't want to invest in good lighting, you're going to in all likelihood, need to photograph your artwork outside or where it can be hit by direct sunlight. You want the light to be evenly distributed across your artwork, because one of the things that you will notice is if you have any what we call hot spots where the light is really focused on a specific spot on the image, it's going to look darker where the light's not hitting it directly. So you may need to invest not only in good lighting, but a good method to diffuse that light. Now, lighting can come in the form of flash, both on camera, off camera, flash strobes, or just your regular light boxes that a lot of photographers will use as well. The key is not to hit the picture too harshly with that light, but to distribute the light evenly and softly and naturally. So when you start using just regular indoor light, like your fluorescent lights, your incandescent light bulbs, things of that nature, you're more likely to have a color cast in which you're going to have to make some adjustments to that image. Now, and we'll talk about the tools to make adjustments with as well. Matter of fact, I think, Melissa, you're going to talk about some software programs to make adjustments. Now, so again, there are a wide range of tutorials, videos, blog posts, things of that nature as far as a technique to do so. But if you're going to get good high quality images, you're going to need to at least, in all likelihood, you're going to want to invest in a good, decent camera. Now, I think when I first started talking to people about capturing their images, I used to tell people when they started capturing, with the camera, so make sure you invest in a high-end digital SLR camera, DSLR. With the way technology has advanced over the years, I no longer can say that. We have customers that submit images of their artwork that look just pristine. I mean, they are just, they look like they were professionally photographed, but they were captured with the latest Apple iPhone. And so, and they were captured outside. Maybe they didn't get it right the first time, but they played with it and they found what works for them. So before you invest in expensive lights and an expensive camera, try it with your phone. See how it comes out. Do some test photography with your phone. I never thought I'd be saying this, but the quality of the output of prints that people are getting from just capturing images with their phones has been amazing. Another tool you can use, and this was kind of I'll go into that, but another tool you can use is a scanner. Now, scanning your artwork, in my opinion, is going to yield some of the best images for reproduction. Okay. Now, there are several ways you can go about doing it. One, you can spend thousands of dollars, and if you're lucky, you might be able to find, because they're kind of hard to find even, a wide format flatbed scanner. Now, I probably wouldn't recommend going that route. I definitely wouldn't recommend going that route. The other option is to find yourself a nice, decent, like Epson makes them, HP makes them a flatbed scanner. And you don't see these around. I can't think of the last time I saw one at Best Buy or.
What, the flatbed scanner?
Yeah.
They come now as the printer scanner fax. They're like a combo.
Yeah, but no, you can still buy regular scanners. You don't see them. You're gonna have to order one online, but they used to be all the rage. Everyone had a scanner hooked up to their computer. But a scanner is one method you can go with, and it doesn't have to be large. It can just be a standard scanner. Now, when you're scanning with that, you're going to have to take multiple scans of different sections, different parts of your image, and you're going to have to stitch that image together. Now, that's really not as difficult as it sounds, because with tools like Photoshop and some of these, what we call stitching programs, which usually they were designed with the intent of creating, seamless panoramic images from multiple shots from a camera, multiple photographs of a camera. But it can actually piece together automatically, like a puzzle, all the different pictures that you took or that you're capturing with that scanner. Now, you can also use that, and I'll tell you how you use that same technique with a camera, so you can get super high resolution images. But with a scanner, you can scan it, and you're going to have to actually physically hold the painting or the artwork over the scanner, or probably in contact with the bed of the scanner. And you're going to have to scan the different sections of that artwork. Now, it can be a little cumbersome to do it that way, but it is doable. Now, I found something that was really cool. For about $60, I found this little handheld scanner. It's called a Munbyn, M-U-N-B-Y-N. That's the version I found. But I saw several versions on Amazon, and this, I think, cost me about $60. I said, why not? And it's cordless. Okay. Now, I do have to plug it into like a mini USB, what they call them, USB-C, I think, or the small USB format, and then plug that into my computer when I want to transfer the image. But it actually stores the image on a little mini card, little tiny SD card. So if you have one of those readers on your computer, or one of those mini SD cards, you can do it that way as well. But this particular tool was really cool, and we tested it. A friend of mine, he had some paintings which he wanted to reproduce. And so they were 11 by 14s. They weren't very big. But I said, what? That's the perfect opportunity to test this. So he brought them over. We took them out of the frame, and they were paintings done probably a good 50 years ago, and they were done on panels, canvas panels, like the ones you buy at an art supply store. So they were a little warped, because over time those tend to warp. So I had him hold down the corners, and what I did is I just ran this over. Now I did I did 2 passes. No, I'm sorry. I did 4 passes. I did 2 vertical and then 2 horizontal. Now after that, I brought the scans into Photoshop and then used the photo stitching tool in Photoshop to piece those together. Generally, it was a pretty easy process. The only downside was that it did take me a few tries before I finally got the technique on scanning the artwork so that the scans didn't come out distorted. I had to make sure that I was very even in my scan when I was moving vertically and horizontally, otherwise it would create this weird distortion. Fortunately, if I saw one of the passes was like that, I could go back and redo it and delete that bad scan and then recompile. The other downside that I found with this is that for a $60 scanner, it's probably fine for scanning documents, 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper that you want to store and you want to scan. But as far as scanning artwork, one of the biggest issues that I ran into is that it required substantial color adjustments because the quality of the scan, while sharp and crisp, which is generally what one of the first things we think about with digital images, the colors were way off. So it didn't do a good job of actually capturing the colors with any accuracy. Now I was able to make adjustments and I had the actual original paintings there so I could, match the colors, but for anyone that's not well versed in utilizing, say, tools that a program like Photoshop has to offer, or some of these other image editing programs where you can do some really deep tonal adjustments, it might be a little bit complex to do that, but it is something you can try. So if you are comfortable with making color adjustments in Photoshop and don't want to spend a lot of money but want to get a really good sharp and crisp scan, then a tool like this is not bad for $60. So those are those are basically the methods to capture that you have at your disposal. Again, probably least expensive because everyone has them is a cell phone. Second least expensive, one of these handheld scanners. Problem with this again is you need to do some color adjustment. The next is going to be a $200 scanner that by Epson or HP, but it's a little cumbersome because you're going to have to hold your artwork and scan in multiple sections.
Just FYI on a tip, if somebody's looking for the scanners, I don't know about you, I buy my computers, things like that through Best Buy. I got I've gotten actually two nice Epson scanners desktop for under $80 once I use my rewards and you get to that end of year sales. You can get really nice scanners, to be on a budget.
Yeah, so
that's a way to go do it.
yeah, I don't know if everyone heard that or not. If you were muted, I'll let Melissa repeat that what she said because I think she was muted.
Okay. Well, one tip I've done, like I said, budget I've worked on, and Best Buy offers a great program where you get rewards. So if you're buying your computers, if you're buying cameras, things like that there, and you want a scanner or something like that, buying those and using the rewards around, First Friday sales, you can get some really nice stuff for under $100. And I think of the scanners that I got there, I got them for under $80. They were Epson scanners that scan at 1200 DPI. And the surface face is about 11. I think those are about 10 by 11 or 11 by 14 that you can fit on those surface sizes. And because James is saying, you can go ahead and scan on there in sections if you want to. I think what I've done on some of the bigger things where I can't actually close the door because maybe it's on a canvas that's a little bit wide, I've actually just used a black blanket and I drop it over to get a decent scan and not have the light shoot out or get a light glare on my scan. So that's one tip with using the scanners.
Yeah, let me mention something else about scanning, which is very important. Is do not now. Melissa mentioned the scanners can scan at 1200 DPI, which is great. I mean, that's super high resolution. More expensive ones probably scan like 2400. But believe it or not, in this thing right here, I believe scans at like 1200. This little handheld one. But you're really, when you're scanning, you're not going to want to scan up much past 300 because it's just going to make your file much larger than it needs to be and harder to manage. And so this kind of gets into, with us at Finer Works and with many color labs, is that they do have file size limits, what you can submit. Now we do a lot of really big printing. So our file size tends to be, we allow for file size that might be a little bit bigger than some other companies do. But it's not uncommon for people to have files that are way past that size. Okay. Generally, the file, I think we recommend that your files be no more than 500 megabytes, because once you get into files that are much larger than that, it really starts taking up a lot of space, and they become very unwieldy. Now we'll have one of the things that I see on occasion is people will submit JPEGs to us, which are huge, and I'm wondering, okay, well, how did that JPEG get so big? Which are, I mean, I've literally seen JPEG files submitted to us that are 300 megabytes, and we run into problems with being able to process files that big, especially a JPEG, because if it's a JPEG that's 300 megabytes, chances are if it were like a TIFF, it would be several gigabytes. And it's easy for the software just to get hung up on files that size, whether it could be that even though we have servers that very extremely powerful servers, some of these servers are processing multiple big giant files at the same time. So, and we don't have just unlimited data farms to be able to utilize. So we do max out our servers quite a bit. Okay. Most of the time when we see files that are that big, we see that there's issues processing those files or the customer's trying to upload the file and it's bugging out on them. It's just not able to run into problems with the upload. Usually it's because that file is so big, our system's just overloaded and can't even open that file to capture that thumbnail, which is needed in order to generate a preview of that print. So one of the things we do is we look at ways we can decrease the file size without, harming the file. Like I said, JPEG is generally is preferred as far as submitting an image for print. It's not the preferred format to permanently store that file. But if you are going to be submitting it to a color lab, JPEG tends to be the preferred because it is a smaller size file. But some of the things, there are things that can bloat a file unnecessarily, make the file size much larger than it needs. One is, when mentioned, people will scan they'll scan their artwork at 1200 pixels per inch or 2400, depending upon the maximum resolution of the scanner. But when it comes to printing that file, it's going to have to be downsized to 300 in all likelihood anyway. Very few color labs print much past or at any resolution higher than 300. So in most cases, they're going to downsize that image, or the software, even if they accept higher resolution images, which we do, the software that actually does the printing is going to downsize it to 300 anyway. So look at your overall file size. If it's much bigger, if it's 2400 pixels per inch at the intended print size it down to 300 pixels per inch at the intended print size. And that will decrease the file size dramatically, make it easier to utilize and manage. Other things that can bloat a file are layers. Now, I'd mentioned TIFF files do have the ability to store files as layers. It also has the ability to store something called alpha channels, which are not something that at this point, you'd be needing to utilize with Finer Works. So if you have these layers or hidden layers or regardless, if you have layers in the file, flatten that TIFF file and save a copy, and you want to send it to us as a TIFF file. Save it as a flattened TIFF file without the layers. So all the layers are combined together into one. That will shrink the file, make it easier to work with. Then even better yet, if it's still too big, save it as a JPEG with the least amount of compression. Okay, so that's another thing. Check to make sure your file is not CMYK. CMYK is a format that's recommended for a more traditional printing environment or commercial printing environment for fine art and photography, RGB. The file is going to be smaller in an RGB format generally than it will be with a CMYK format. And plus, the software that we use to print is going to have less trouble reading the colors than does with CMYK. If we were a sign shop, I'd say, hey, CMYK is the way to go because there's certain things that we can do with spot color and so forth with CMYK. But for general artwork and fine art reproduction, RGB is the way to go. And it'll make your file size larger. Now, for you photographers out there, now this is something that many of y'all are familiar with, and that is ISO. Okay. Now, with making adjustments to the ISO, you can actually create noise within that file, which really puts a lot of, really weighs down that file. So if you have photography and it has lots of ISO noise, then that is going to really bloat up that file. That's going to, I mean, it just, of anything other than except for maybe layers, that probably is going to have the greatest impact as far as file size, and that's ISO noise. So there are things you can do to kind of try to remove that. There's filters in Photoshop. There are third-party filters to remove that. But if you, and we see this with some, or we have seen this with some fine art photographers that use us on a regular basis, is that they will clean up the ISO in there because they have trouble submitting their files to labs with all that, the ISO noise. So yeah, and as John Sines mentioned, the fix for higher ISO is more light. But yeah, if you have an older image that had too much ISO noise, yeah, you might have to utilize some third-party filter or Photoshop filter to try to diminish that. And then, so those are the main things that can really bloat up a file. File resolution's too high, CMYK versus RGB, ISO noise. Oh, another thing is 16-bit versus 8-bit or 32-bit versus 8-bit. There are some benefits with the 16 and 32-bit images, and there's some complaints with that. There might be some detail that you can kind of eke out of that image with a 16-bit image or even 32-bit image. But really the benefits are so few when it comes to print. You're going to see those benefits on your computer screen, which has the capacity to show a wider gamut than any print can ever show. So if you are storing your image in a 16-bit format, fine, great. But when you submit it to the lab, bring it down to 8-bit. It's going to make life so much easier for everyone. Okay. Now, John had mentioned also Topaz, yeah. And you have some information about Topaz. Okay, I'm going to turn this over to Melissa now because she has some good information to share. And I need to kind of go through my notes while she does that to kind of, because I kind of got all out of order and I got to.
Alright, yeah, a
cross
little bit
out.
out of order there.
Yeah.
I was gonna have a couple of things for you to jump back to.
Okay, I'm muting myself. And I'll let you take over.
Okay. And the images I'm showing you guys, they're actually up on our social. And this is to help a little bit too, also with it's kind of the math, I guess, because I mean, a lot of, especially if you're on the art side and you're like me, I hate math. And in one of our Final Works live chats, we had one of our photographers kind of bring this in. It kind of is something to help you with. Printers printing at 300 DPI, and we have a lot of people, especially those of our customers that use geo galleries, that this sometimes gets in their way a little bit, and they're trying to figure out, well, when I upload, I don't know what I have. I don't actually have Photoshop. I don't have anything to look at what my DPI is or what my pixels. I just want a 20 by 30 done. So to do a 20 by 30, you can just multiply that by 300, and that will let you know what your pixels are. And when you upload your images up to Final Works, what's awesome is if you hit up in the top right corner of your image file there, the information will pop up like this right here, and you will see your resolution right there, which will let you know. And then to go ahead and find out how many nice inches you could get, as James was saying, most people go ahead and capture with their phones, and your phones is going to depend on what you have your settings on. Some phones are set at a little bit on the lower resolution so that you have that your images don't take up too much space on the phone. So you want to check what your phone is saving at. For instance, this is just at 704 by 1484 pixels, right? And if I divide that by 300, that tells me what my optimal size would be. Now, and James can explain a little more about our technology. You can go a little bit bigger and still come out with a good print because of the algorithms that our printers have here. And they can kind of go ahead and increase all of that and give you still a really decent image. But if you were to take this and say you wanted a 60-inch print out of it, you're going to lose some quality. But this is one of your first checks before you go through your whole order process with us. It's just check that resolution. And sometimes you have a lot of files on your computers, and we've had people upload a thumbnail instead of the file they mean to print. So part of your checklist as you're going ahead to make a print is just check on that thing to make sure you uploaded the correct file for your print size. And as James is explaining, I guess I'll go and let you still cover stuff, but we have a playlist of different things. As James was explaining, there are multiple ways to kind of capture your art. Cameras, for instance, if you were on our first Thursday or have seen our first Thursday with Jim Landers last month, he was covering color balance, creative exposure, and filters. And we got on that topic of photographing your art. And one, as James is saying, there are multiple ways to do that because there's multiple types of art you have out there. Some of y'all may use reflective surfaces, for instance, and may need some kind of diffused light to it. So even if you're saying you haven't invested in a lighting system, maybe shooting direct sunlight may not do great if you have metallics in your or gold leaf into your art piece. You might actually get a better shot using something diffused, like a thin, what do they call them? Like a window treatment that you have there that kind of lets in light in more diffused. That actually might give you a better shot. So depending on your shot, when you're going to go look at all of these YouTube videos to photograph your work, I do suggest that you kind of look for something that is along the same lines as what you're trying to capture. So if you have a flat matte art piece, as Jim was going into, that direct sunlight might capture it beautifully. Same thing with acrylics. If you have an acrylic with a gloss to it, how much of the reflection you want to show is going to be on how you light that. So there's multiple ways, as James was saying. That's why you'll find all of these variations on how to shoot your art. And then there's, again, there's the one big wide shot and you run capture and you crop down. There's also going in and having your camera on a track that may go ahead and, like James is saying, giving you those sections and you're going to stitch it together. But when you go look in YouTube, there's so many places that are going to give you that step-by-step how-to. And I have come up with a playlist on our YouTube channel of some people to help you with that. And they have also one on there mentioning Topaz, John, that was great. I think James and I were talking about the AI on Topaz and wondering how much, are you really going to increase in that there? But we'll go into those in a little bit. I'll show you those videos. I want to make sure you get all of your stuff on there, but we'll touch on those videos in just a minute. James, did you kind of find where you were?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Melissa brought up Topaz, and Topaz, great tool for a great company that produces software for a wide range of purposes, from creating artistic looking paintings from photos to cleaning up photos to resizing. And one of the things I want to talk about is resizing photos. Topaz is one of the tools which are kind of recommended by the photography community for resizing photos or any digital image that you want to increase the resolution. I want to mention something about that is whenever you are increasing the size of a file, trying to make it a higher resolution image from a smaller image, you are essentially adding pixels which did not exist. Remember, your image file is made up of pixels. Think of it as a stack of blocks. Let's say if this wall behind me were a stack of blocks and each block was a different color and all combined, when you stepped away, you could actually see an image. Well, you want to make that stack of blocks bigger. You want to enlarge that wall. So you have to move the blocks further away from each other, and then you have to fill in all those voids. Now, some software is better at doing that than others. Topaz, for example, has an excellent algorithm, which is great for guessing what color those blocks need to be to fill in those gaps as it enlarges the image. Photoshop doesn't do a bad job. They've improved that feature in Photoshop over the past few years, or past 5 years, I'd say. There's other third-party programs out there. Some of the printing software that's utilized use some very advanced algorithms now to do so. Our own printing software, the software utilizes that. We have several programs, but for our fine art printing, our photo printing, it has these algorithms which do an excellent job. I mean, I have not found a program out there that can really surpass what these do. I mean, I know Topaz is good, but I don't know that's that good, but maybe it is. Regardless, those differences though are really so small and so minute that you may only detect it in certain parts of an image or with certain images, or you're scaling only to a certain extent. Once you start doing this massive enlargements where the software has to do, the more guessing it has to do, the less accurate it's going to be. So just kind of keep that in mind. So if you have an image that in general is, say, 8 by 10 at 300 pixels per inch, and you want to enlarge it to a 24 by 30, it's not going to look as sharp and crisp as it would if you only enlarge it to a 16 by 20. Now, for you photographers out there, or for anyone capturing their artwork via a camera, one of the things to keep in mind is you might have the biggest and baddest camera and being able to capture huge, 24, 30, whatever. I don't know, what are cameras out now? What are, like the digital SLRs? They're way up there. I lost count after about 20, but The ones that are capturing these super large files, say 24 megabytes, where you can print, 30 by 40s, at 300 pixels per inch or what have you. And you don't have to do any enlarging and so forth. Keep in mind, though, is that you might be capturing at these really high resolutions, but is your focus that good? And that's one of the problems we see a lot of times is with people are sending us 50 mega shots that were captured with 50 megapixel cameras, or as John mentioned, 60 plus in medium format, which I guess is
Like 150 or something like that.
yeah. So they're sending us these files, but their lenses don't keep, or their doesn't keep up with that resolution. So when you get up and close, you don't have the super sharp print. You have a print that looks good from standing, 10 feet away, looks nice and crisp and sharp from 10 feet away. But when you get closer to look at it and say, well, it doesn't look as in focus as I thought it would be. And that's because and you kind of get what you pay for when it comes to camera lenses is, the cheaper lenses that generally are, sometimes struggle to keep up with the higher end lenses. So you do run into what I call the focus factor when it comes to enlarging your images or printing very large prints. If your focus is not sharp and crisp, you might not really be benefiting from a super large file. And sometimes the third-party programs like Topaz and Photoshop, just the enlarging a smaller file that wasn't captured as high, sometimes they sharpen, crisp up that image better than it was shot natively. So just something to kind of keep in mind, that the quality of the capture is going to become of greater importance when you get up to these very large files, or these very, when you're capturing natively at these very large sizes. Let's see. So we covered that. And do we have any questions at this point?
I think we've been kind of getting those as we've gone. So far, I've kind of been capturing those as we go.
Now you have some more information you're going to
Yeah,
cover.
did you also want to talk about soft proofing and test kits?
Oh, yeah. So soft proofing. Soft proofing is really best demonstrated. But let me kind of explain. And we have a video.
Videos I have will kind of show.
Yeah, we have some videos. Noelle, who works for us, she did an excellent, but it's a little dated, but it's still a relevant video on soft proofing, which y'all can watch on our YouTube channel. It's still there, right?
Yes.
Okay, so again, it's a little dated. It's using an older version of Photoshop, but those tools are still available in the current version of Photoshop. And Lightroom is another program by Adobe that has come a long way in providing excellent tools for soft proofing. So soft proofing, and I started talking about this earlier, is the process of simulating on your screen what you are going to get in print. And that is very important when it comes to doing art reproductions, or where you're trying to be as accurate as possible with that print. You want that print to match as closely as you can to that original. Okay, so soft proofing goes a long way in doing that. And it's a lot easier than trying to do and less, you can save, you can spend a lot of money not soft proofing, because the alternative is to do a test print, get that, and then make adjustments based on that test print. Okay, and then do another test print. And now sometimes that actually, I know artists that find that process very lucrative because they sell those prints as artist proofs. So, I guess maybe I shouldn't say that's the more expensive way, because maybe it could be the more lucrative way. But anyway, if you don't want to go that route, soft proofing is the way to go. Now, there are several elements that must be in place in order for soft proofing to really work. You can't eliminate any. They all have to be in play. One is a calibrated monitor. Okay. The other is you need to have what's called a ICC or ICM profile, which is a color profile. It's basically a data file, which tells a program like Photoshop or Lightroom, where you're doing your soft proofing, how to simulate that particular, how to simulate the colors, okay, that your image is utilizing, okay, based upon the type of printer being used and the type of inks and the printer settings themselves. Okay, so you need calibrated monitor, you need the IC file, okay, and then you need of course, a program like Photoshop or Lightroom, okay, to do that. Now, the way the process works, and I'm going to just kind of describe it, and so try to kind of just so you have something to base on. So when you're seeing the video that we have on YouTube, when you go back and watch that, you'll kind of have an idea of what's going on. But what it does is, again, the first element is a calibrated monitor. You're then going to open up that image in a program like Photoshop or Lightroom, and you're going to go to the soft proof option within the program. And again, we'll show you, we have videos to show you how to access that. And then what you're going to do is you're going to actually load that file, that IC profile, okay, and apply that to the image so that you can see how that image looks. Now, keep in mind, you are dealing with a projected light source, or your projected version of that image. So you may see things that, or you may see, oh, that image looks terrible. Well, again, you're looking at a projected light source. So the soft proofing, unless you are looking at it in the perfect environment, may look a little kind of, may look bad. Doesn't, and the print may look better than the soft proof, but that's kind of more of an optical illusion, because you're trying to, your brain's trying to, is seeing or is perceiving projected light versus what the print will be, which is reflected light. But anyway, so soft proofing is the process of actually simulating, okay? And again, we have the actual techniques and tutorials, but it is the process of actually simulating on your screen what that image will look like in print. The profiles that we have can actually be, we don't have profiles for every single printing method, because not every single printing method can be properly profiled. For instance, if you wanted to soft proof we have IC profiles, which is that data file for our Chromolux metal prints, but that soft proof, or that IC profile, is only as accurate as the media that's being printed to is consistent to. And what I mean by that is Chromolux, which is the most popular brand out there for producing metal prints, is terribly inconsistent with their white points, which is the level of whiteness on their metal. We order huge volumes and stacks of the metal, and we cut those down. And we will see inconsistencies in the brightness of the white levels from one panel to another. And they look like they may have probably come, they're supposed to have come from the same run, but we'll see inconsistencies from one panel to the other. So certain items you cannot really effectively soft proof, because the soft proofing assumes that the base white that the image is being printed to is going to be consistent. Now, our fine art papers have the highest level of consistency that I've seen, especially the Hanmill line. And was it last month? Last month we had our Hanmill rep speaking, and that's on, you can go back and watch that. They have, out of all the paper, they have been incredibly consistent. One of the most consistent brands that I've come across. So we feel very confident in the profiles that we offer. And you can find those profiles actually on our media pages for the fine art papers. And Melissa has shown you on screen where you can find those. And so you can download those profiles. Now, I must admit, we do have to frequently change out those profiles. For instance, we have, as our old printers die out, we have to upgrade because Canon or Epson, they don't give us the option to go buy the same old printer model that we used to have, because they're no longer being made. So we have to buy the latest model all the time. And unfortunately, we go through, our printers are like our wide format printers. They only last us 2 years tops, because the amount of usage that they get. Occasionally we're late. Well, I take that back. Occasionally we're able to extend the lifespan by a few extra months if we're able to find a part. But generally it's rare that they last us much more than about 2 years. So we find ourselves frequently having to change out the profiles if that particular media can no longer be printed on that particular on the previous printer. And so usually that means a new profile has to be created. And the new profile might or might not be as well done as the previous profile, or it might be better, it might be more accurate. We tend to use factory profiles rather than when we can, versus creating our own, because we give you an example, our archival matte paper, our most popular paper, because we print so much of it, we can't profile just, we have to utilize multiple wide format printers throughout the day for that particular paper. So we use a profile, an IC profile provided by the manufacturer, because that's going to be the most forgiving, even though it's not specific to that particular printer. It's specific at least to the model of printer, the brand and model of printer. So generally it's rare that it becomes an issue that profile is not profiled to that specific serial numbered printer. So, but some people feel that it needs to be, and maybe it, for the most optimal printing, that could be the case, but it's not very realistic for us, where we have to, run the media across multiple printers, especially if it's a large run. Someone will order 1,000 16x20s, and we have to run that over 4 or 5 of our wide format printers sometimes. So anyway, so I was going to touch on something else relating to that, and I kind of
The ICC profiles?
on the ICC profiles. Okay, I think that was it. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Just wanna
Um,
hit something.
yeah. I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And don't forget, I wanted to talk about the certificates
Yes,
too.
I have it down here.
Yeah.
File size to make
The
your
max.
file, your maker's file small without losing quality.
The max file.
Making a file size smaller without losing quality. Like
Okay. Yeah, that's probably a good thing. You know, we talked about enlarging. Melissa was saying, if you couldn't hear her, she was saying, talk about making the files smaller without losing quality, which you'd think would be, you know, a no-brainer, which, you know, obviously you shouldn't lose quality, but actually you can lose quality when you make your files smaller. So when you make your file smaller, it's important, or if you're enlarging, anytime you're changing the size of the file, you want to make sure that you are, well, anytime you are enlarging a file, you want to make sure that you have, in Photoshop, we call it resampling. You want to make sure that that's checked. Now, Photoshop has several, a bicubic linear, and a hybrid version. I can't remember the name of it. But if you're enlarging your files, you want to make sure that that is checked. When you're planning on downsizing that image, okay, now you can choose to remove pixels, okay, but we usually recommend, if when you're downsizing, if that resolution is going to not make that file, you know, too large, uncheck that option. Okay. And then review that file by turning on the ruler feature within Photoshop and trying to zoom in, zoom out to the dimensions, to the physical dimensions of that ruler. If you were to hold up a ruler to your screen, you're actually seeing a scaled version of your image. So that's one of the ways that when you're downsizing the file, you can review it, or you can also upsize it. So, you know, so I'm going to turn this over to Melissa, and she has some additional info to share.
Okay, I know with me, with a lot of the GeoGallery artists, I am working with a lot of artists that are brand new to printing, and some have invested into Photoshop on there. And one of the other things that we tell them is, you know, if it's the first time you have ever gotten your stuff printed, you've done all of the calibrations, you've checked your monitor, you've done the ICC profile even. I still have a lot of artists that still physically want to take a look at their prints. At the same time, if they're selling 20 by 30, 36 size inch prints and stuff, they maybe say, well, you know, to buy every single one, some of them do upload anywhere between like from 10 to maybe 125 images that they've had over their career. So that could be kind of expensive. I think what I have suggested them is to do a test print that is kind of like a slice of each of your images. And let me see if this will just really quick to kind of just illustrate that. Let me just make sure I share this correct part of my screen. Okay. So for instance, let's take a look at these images really quick, just the image size on here. And that way I have James here who can also help me. As you can see, the resolution is set for printing for 300, and it is for 36 inches and 22 inches right there. We've got another image over here. Same thing, we'll look at the image size. And it's also at 300 DPI, 20 by 17. What I would do when people are trying to be a little more economical on how they're going to get their test prints is I would say, you know, I just tell them, just go ahead and create a new file that's maybe like an 8 by 10, 11 by 14, whatever you're comfortable with as far as making sure you could see everything. And you can put more images in this. I'm just going with 2 so it doesn't slow my computer. So let's say we just do an 8 by 10 and create that. And James, jump in if there's anything you think I should do.
I'll unmute myself. Hopefully this doesn't create any feedback.
Just, yeah, just, I guess pop me up right here and I'll mute.
Yeah.
So what I tell a lot of them is to take a sample slide right here. This way, let's say I would look for the detail and the color right here. So I might just take a thing. If you look at the image right here as a selection tool, as it's going here, it's giving you how many inches it's taking there. Right. So I don't want to go too big and take up the whole 8 by 10, but let's just grab a quick thing. Control C, copy that. And I'll put that here. And move that up a little bit.
So we have a scaled.
Yeah, no scaling. Actually, I'm not sizing down and I'm keeping just a slice. It's literally if you cut the piece of paper out of a 20 by 30. And then same
We call it
thing.
a scaled
Oh.
crop of the file.
Mhm.
Scaled to the intended, to that 2 by 2 size, I should
Yeah,
say.
just again, so you can see color and detail there. I think it might have gotten that too big, but. And so when we've seen a couple like this one I just did accidentally wrong. So Z, go smaller. And again, just look at the inches there. This is a big file right there. A couple inches. Okay, Control C. Again, scale wise, it's the same. So I have that. We have some customers.
And this is just so you can at least check the resolution, so the
Exactly.
clarity, the sharpness.
Mhm.
And it obviously it's limited to your ability to detect color variations, because that part of the image may be very accurate, but there might be other tones that are less accurate in that painting. So it's not the best way of relying on color accuracy, but it definitely will give you a good idea of the resolution, whether or not it's sharp and clear enough for the size that you plan on printing ultimately.
James, how well does that work if they plan on using, let's say they're going to do everything on archival matte paper? If they were to do that if they have their ICC profiles, will this, if they feel like they shouldn't have to do any more alteration of their color?
I mean,
that would at least give them a true match of their color.
well, like I said, it's not, you're not able to, if you soft proofed it and you're happy with soft proof, and then you go this route to check the sharpness and the clarity, then there's a good chance that you're going to find very few issues with your color, if any. But again, it just, I don't, it's kind of like looking at your print through, just through a small window, or through, just through a tube, and just picking a spot on and just looking at that one spot in that print. You don't know whether or not the rest of the print was accurate. That one spot might be accurate. One thing we frequently find, even with soft proofing, is sometimes you have to do isolated color adjustments, especially if the light was hitting the painting unevenly, because there are times where you will find that you will see things in print that you didn't really notice on screen. It happens time and time again. Blemishes on the painting, marks here and there that you think, oh, the print has, and it happens that the print will have a blemish or something like that. But more often than not, there's a blemish or a mark that was on the original painting that the artist never noticed. And so wasn't noticed on screen, but it was there, and it stands out in the print. And so there's things that can happen where you won't necessarily notice, especially color differences, until you actually see it in print. But the alternative, there is something you can do, so you can view a totality of the image, and that is to create a smaller version of the print as kind of as a small proof. Now, it will have the effect of actually what looks like it's concentrating the colors. And I've seen instances, and I've described instances where it will make lighter tone prints look darker when it's smaller, because you're not seeing the same expanse or tonal range physically with a larger print. So it may look a little darker when it's smaller, but just something you have to kind of contend with if you're going to do like small, and we see people do that. They'll create small contact sheets. Generally, it's fine, but occasionally it's a way for just kind of general all around, just kind of get an idea if it's capturing most of the colors, okay, or at least the major colors.
And another thing too is, as James was mentioning earlier, artist proofs. Definitely you can get those in, and you can actually sell them and make money on your test print. So
and with and we are running out of time, so I probably should bring up so we do have something that will actually help with that. We have certificates of authenticity, which we are going to be offering. Now we have blank certificates of authenticity, the handmill ones, that you can purchase the whole box of them, or you can order, I think you can order them individually as well. But we're actually coming up with a program where you can have certificates included with your prints themselves, that certificates that are assigned to your prints. So now you can easily create your own certificates of authenticity. You can go find the certificate down, template somewhere, download it, print them out on your office printer, your home printer, what have you. But we actually are working on a system which will capture the essential information that a certificate usually contains, and you can include it with your print, whether or not you're having that print drop shipped to your customer or sent to you. The certificates will have various fields, from the description of the print itself, like the inks it was used that were used, to the title of the artwork, to whether or not it was an open edition, artist proof, a numbered version or numbered edition, or what was the fourth one? Artist proof, open edition, artist proof, numbered, and always original / unique piece, which could be for an original painting, or let's say it's a commissioned digital portrait that what you had us print and sent to your customer, or a portrait itself, a photo portrait.
I know some people do the hand embellished prints actually
as unique pieces. So and you can have the certificate. Now the templates are really beautiful. They're going to be 3 different tones, kind of a gold tone, a called mint green, and then a steel blue, kind of bluish gray. And so we'll have that available. That was supposed to be available actually starting the 1st, and we were supposed to announce it yesterday. But
James, how will we do the difference between the Hammermill certificate and those, like when you go to the top right now on our page?
Yeah. So the certificates that can be included with prints, with everything filled out, those are going to actually be, there's going to be a button when you add your, after you add your artwork to your shopping cart, there'll be a button where you can select, where you can open up a window and fill out that information, and then have that print included. Now, if you don't want to include the fields, you can actually have a blank certificate printed out and sent to you, which, some of those fields, like for instance, the artist name, you may want to keep that blank so you can physically sign it. So you can, fill it up completely, or you can, you can choose. Now, so this is just a tool. People have asked us for certificates. Let's talk about the importance of a certificate of authenticity and just ultimately what it does. A certificate of authenticity improves the value of the artwork, okay, of the print. It takes a concept that is a print, okay, and makes it into a print plus one. So it increases the value in the eyes of the recipient and the value in the eyes of the artist itself, because it's actually a document that implies that this print is not just an image printed on a piece of paper, but it is an actual work of art. That's why we call our certificates of authenticity, or COAs of fine art, because it is supposed to emphasize that when a person is spending $100 on just a 8x10 print, that they are getting something that is valuable. Okay, so keep that in mind. Is the certificates will enhance the value of the artwork. We're estimating that in some cases artists will be able to upsell their artwork, $20, $30 in some cases, just by the addition of a certificate of authenticity. So so it is a way to increase your profits. And I wrote something on that just what was it, last week. It's on our blog. So anyway, I think that's about all we have time for, right?
Okay, yeah, we'll just go with a couple of quick closing things. I'll
Okay.
roll them up really quick.
You're on mute. I'm gonna
About a minute.
have a few things to close up with.
Okay, guys, as we were talking about, we didn't get a cover because we did go a little long, but it is up there for you to view anytime you want to on our playlist. If you go there and click on our channel playlist, I have this thing, preparing image help. Gina, I noticed you had a question about the ICC profiles, where to plug them in. I actually have a video in here kind of visualizing ICC profiles, but if you go into YouTube, get a tutorial, it'll show you how to plug in those ICC profiles as well. There's really just a whole bunch of stuff in here, guys. I think there's about 8 videos, and some are from our previous Finer Works chat, where James was going into Jaclay print preparation in Photoshop. There's also this one that I found that was called the top 5 best free photo editing softwares. Again, make sure when you go through those that you check what kind of system parameters you need to have on your computer to run those softwares, even if they're web-based. There's also a couple of things here if you're using Procreate to go ahead and help you with making those digital arts print ready. There's, again, touching up on kind of upsizing your images from low resolution images. We have one here that uses Photoshop and Lightroom, and then there is a really quick tutorial on Topaz, and those are some of the things that we talked about here. If you also look on how to make prints of your art here, she goes into photographing your art. And again, that's just one way of photographing. There's multiple ways to photograph, so make sure that it matches the art that you have when you look for something like that. The next thing is that don't forget that Thursday, we will be doing our first Thursday with Jim Landers, and it's he's got a great topic that'll fit for anybody who is either a photographer or artist, and that is foundations of building your price list on here. Now for December, we were talking about, we're going to probably have a first Tuesday chat that'll kind of give you guys things to look forward to in 2022 through Finer Works, and just kind of maybe run off some special dates throughout the year that you can kind of gear some of your print sales to, and that way you can mark them up on social and get utilize those hashtags. So we'll talk about that for December, and first Tuesday actually falls after first Thursday this December, so it will be December the 7th, I believe. And you can go ahead and join us there. Let's see, James.
Our holiday deadline is in our last newsletter.
Okay, great.
We mentioned that, but yeah, just make sure they're aware of.
Okay, and if you open up your newsletter that was just sent out, we'll go ahead, there's the holiday deadlines that are in there. And those will also be up on our social, but those will give you a lot of ideas on when you need to get your stuff in, especially if you're making any promises to people on print sales. We do want you to remember that, delivery of your print is turnaround time plus whatever time you chose for transport. And you can always go down to the bottom of our site. We do have the turnaround time and shipping rates does have the different shipping methods depending on what you select. Also know that these times do tend to get a little longer during the Christmas season.
And also, we are starting to already hit some of the third quarter. We just entered it. It feels like we just started the fourth quarter. I mean, inventory shortages on some of our frames. So don't wait too long on frames if you don't have to. I know with some customers, some users, it's not an option because they're fulfilling orders. Generally, the frames that we use a lot of, most of those we have plenty of inventory still, but some of the others we're starting to see some inventory shortages. Our canvas stretcher bars, our two main suppliers totally out. Unfortunately, we have a third supplier that backup, so we are able to get canvas stretcher bars, which have been in short supply, like I said, with some of the other suppliers. Paper media, we don't see any problems right now on paper media, our fine art papers. Our canvas, we generally, the supplies there, it's just getting it shipped to us has been problematic. Fortunately, one of our main suppliers is right up the road in Austin, so worst case scenario, if they can't ship it, we can drive up there and get it. And then other items, mugs, mouse pads, specialty stuff. We haven't had too many problems. Die bond, we in metal, those have no longer been a problem because we've increased the amount of inventory we stock on those. And then turnaround times have been improving as we've hired more people. And so that's helped quite a bit. Anyway, I think that's it. And we're looking forward to, we're starting to enter to the holiday season. So, well.
Well, again, thank you guys for joining us. If you're catching us towards the end, Gina, the replay will be on YouTube and it's available immediately. And if you have any questions that we did not cover here, just put them in the comments section and we will get back to you on those, okay? And again, for the support, we appreciate you joining us, and email us any topics that you would like to see for 2022.